Hi, let's learn how to use the JavaScript onScroll event. So I made a mock website so we can practice this. So as we scroll, see how this element faded in, and now the next element is going to slide in. So let's see that one more time. As we scroll, we're triggering different events, and that's what we're going to be learning today. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do on scroll is we're going to have this div, which contains welcome to our website and an image, fade in once we scroll to it. So it's not going to be visible, and as we scroll to it, it'll fade in. So the first thing we need to do is we need to create some classes. So we're adding a transition property so it knows to listen for changes in its opacity value, and a transition duration of, let's say, just 1 second really quick. So we're letting it know that whatever changes happen to the opacity, they should occur within 1 second. So we'll have an opacity before class, whose opacity will be set to 0, so it's not visible, and we'll add these properties to our parent div, which contains this content here. So if you can see in the HTML I shared with you, it would be this div. Okay, so we're going to add the opacity transition class and the opacity before class. And as you can see, the div is no longer visible. Okay, so we also need to make one last one for this effect to work, and it'll be opacity after, which will fade the opacity back in by setting its opacity value to 1. So this class will be added to the element in JavaScript, and here's where we're going to learn how to use onScroll events. So let's add an event listener to our window element. So add event listener, listening for scroll, and we're going to listen to a function of our choice. Let's just say scroll func. Okay, so we're using ES6 arrow functions. And what we want to do here is just to make sure that our function is working on scroll, let's console log. Let's say scroll, or rather, this is a very useful method, by the way, window.scroll y. Okay, and you'll see how this works in a second. So let's refresh the page. And as we scroll, where we are in terms of pixels will be displayed here at the bottom. So see, right now we are 408 pixels deep into the page. As we go lower, the number gets larger because the more pixels we're going down. Okay? So this is a good measuring tool. So say we have the span here that we want to fade in. We can measure using window.scroll y where, or rather when, we want the div to fade in. So let's say we want it to fade in around the 200 mark, because when we get to it, once we're like a quarter into the div, we're like about 200 pixels. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to select the element. So let's make a variable called, let's say, 1, and it has a div, not a div, sorry, a ID called 1. Okay, so let me show you really quick. So see, the parent container div has an ID called 1. So in our JavaScript, we are selecting 1. Okay? And what we need to do is we need to toggle the opacity before value off, and we need to add the opacity after class, so its opacity will fade in. And we want to do this when the window.scroll top equals around 200. Okay? So we need an if statement, and we'll go document dot document element dot scroll top is greater than or equal to, let's say, 200. One.class list.toggle opacity before and one.class list.add opacity after. And this should be working. So let's give it a go. And there it is. So let's use window.scrollY method to measure when it is exactly that we are fading in. So let me reload the page. Nice. And actually we deleted the console log, so let's add that back in there. So window.scrollY, and now we can see exactly when it is we're fading in. So let's refresh our page and see nothing's happening because 126, 135, blah, blah, blah. Let's push it, push it, push it, and then 200, and that's when we fade in. So let's act natural, and there we go. Okay, so let's add one more effect. So we're going to have the next div slide in. So we're going to have the content over here on top slide in from the left, and we're going to have the image down here slide in from the right. Okay, so the process is very similar. So we'll create a class another transition property in which we let the CSS know to listen for changes in the position relative left and position relative right. So we need to set up position equals relative. This gives us the power to move elements around on the page. So we're going to add a class called slide transition that's going to add a property relative so we can move things around. We're then going to add a transition property which will listen to changes in our elements when they're moved to left or right. And we want these transitions to last, let's say, 1 second as well. So transition duration 1. Okay, so similar as before, like when we had opacity before, we also have slide left before. So we're going to add these to our span tags. So this is the second section, which is the one we're looking at here on the right. And we're going to add the classes slide transition and slide left before. Okay? So as you can see now the header is gone because it got pushed all the way to the left. And now we need to add the after property. So slide left after, and we're going to zero it out back to 0px. And the reason why, even though we're sliding in from the left, I'm saying right, is because when you use position relative, if you say right value 1000px, you're pushing the content that's here in the center from the right to the left 1000 pixels, if that makes sense. So you're here in the center, and you're getting pushed from the right to the left 1000 pixels, okay? And now we need to make the classes for the image, which will be the same, or very similar rather, but just opposite. So slide right before, and we'll give it left value of 1000px. So remember, it's getting pushed from the left to the right. And then we need to zero it out. So slide right after, and we're going to set its left value to 0px, okay? So let's add these classes in our HTML. So we need to add slide transition to both of these span tags, and we need to add their appropriate classes for sliding in left and right. Okay, so we have slide left before, so we did that, and now we need to go into our second span. We need to do slide transition as well so it knows how to behave, and then slide right before. Perfect. And as you can see, both elements are pushed in their directions. So now, within the JavaScript, we need to toggle off the slide left before and slide right before, and then add the classes slide right after and slide left after. So they'll come into view once we scroll to a specific point. So now we're going to use the window.scrollY method again to measure where on the page, or when rather, we want to fade in. So we're going to fade in around, let's say, 750 or so, right? Let's see. 730 is more so when we start to see a bit of white space. 730, okay? So let's select the elements. So we had two span tags. This time we're not targeting the divs, we're targeting the span tags within the divs. So span 1 and span 2. Okay, but it has an ID of 2 and the second span has an ID of 3. So let's target them. So I'm just going to go 2 equals document.query selector 2. And let's just copy and paste that, and we'll rename it 3 because we're a little lazy. Okay, so if document element.scroll top is greater than or equal to, we said 730 pixels, we want 2.classList.toggle off slide left before. And we want to add 2.classList.add slide left after. So let's see if this is working. Oh, let's refresh the page. Perfect. Did you see that, guys? So now let's get the third element to also do its little trick. So 3.classList.toggle off slide right after. And then 3.classList.add, oh, and I wrote toggle off. It's actually toggle, guys, but we are toggling off the class. And slide right, oh my bad, guys. So I was going a little bit too fast. So slide right before is the class we're toggling off, and we're adding slide right after. Okay, and this should be working. So let's refresh the page. So we have our content fading in, and we have our content sliding in. Perfect, guys. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you so much for watching.